Hey there, everybody. Welcome to episode 59 of The Next Report. Guess who is back?
Woohoo! Long time, folks.
Yeah, Stephen Kelley has been settling into his new place. Where are you at now, for those who don't know?
I actually moved about an hour away from where I did live. We lived in Warrensburg, both of us, and then within the past few months, we both actually moved. I now live in Eastern Independence, so little ways away. It's closer to work, and that was my main thing. So I was having to drive 45 minutes or so to work every single day.
And I had to. You already know about the harrowing saga of me signing up for DSL with CenturyLink. You had to deal with.
Oh yeah. Well, I had AT&T Uverse where I actually was cut off from the internet for about 2 weeks before I could finally get them to come out and be able to handle that for me. That was exciting.
Yeah, yeah, and at the very least, I'm very fortunate because the little CenturyLink building, we're only a few blocks away from it. So,
Nice.
and we kind of went over in previous episodes the benefits of DSL if you're really right in the center of the service area in your city or town. You don't have to share bandwidth with your neighbor, so to
No.
speak. But um, but there are other things to take into consideration. Um, it's been a while. Been thinking a lot about you as of late. One day I was perusing the internet and an article from Cracked popped up. Um, talking about five things I learned about being the most hated person on the internet, at least for a few weeks, by an individual named Zoe Quinn. And it's one of those things where it's kind of hard to criticize because if you're not careful, you'll be accused of being a misogynist. I'm not even pronouncing that correctly, but accused of basically bias against women. I'm reading this. I read the whole thing, and I'm like, something about this is off kilter. Just instinct immediately. 9 times out of 10, if gender-based arguments are used, the full story is not being told.
Yeah, usually it's a knee-jerk reaction to something that's actually going on, and they basically, a lot of people, on both sides of it, because there's the opposite argument, that people make as well, that, if it's a man, the media is controlled by women. If it's a woman, the media is controlled by men, and so and so. And they jump, people that are in that situation jump to that crazy, thing, and it's just like it invalidates arguments when you do that. That's the same as, saying, well, like comparing a politician to Hitler. You go that far and you're done, basically.
Yeah, basically multiple violations of Godwin's law.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that you brought up, to kind of illustrate what we're about to discuss is, I kind of remember this popping up like a long time ago, in internet time. It's eons ago. Stephen Colbert pops off about what was that phrase that he used?
Well, it was basically he was trying to he was bringing up the whole Washington Redskins controversy, where the owner of the Redskins, despite public outrage and Native American tribes not wanting to have the team be called Redskins anymore, because that's not a name they call themselves. That'd be like, dropping the N-bomb on a sports team. You can't do that. But he is a satirist, and to satirize it, he had a video of the owner basically saying, hey, we've made a Native American college fund or something, and it was very half-hearted. So he jokingly said that it would be the equivalent of having a company for Asian people called, and let me see if I can get this exact thing, the Ching Chong Ding Dong Foundation for Sensitivity to Orientals or whatever. And it's inherently racist because that's the joke. It was basically saying, yes, that this guy doesn't care, and he basically made an even more ridiculous thing that was similar. But what had happened is, out of context, people on Twitter jumped on this, started a hashtag called Cancel Colbert, and ran with it. And they were basically any grievance that they had against male white men became suddenly Stephen Colbert became the poster boy of. And it went ridiculous, basically, in the matter of days.
So and so there's and I want to also note the whole Redskins thing. Those who were trying to get the team to change its name, that in and of itself wasn't without controversy. It's been tried before. The way I read it was a poll was done of Native Americans, and in that poll, most of them didn't care. But because certain leading questions weren't asked, it wasn't seen as valid. And again, it kind of shows. I'll have to find it and pull up that article too, but it kind of also goes into the topic that we're talking about today. I don't watch football, so I personally don't care one way or another. Because there's been high schools exclusive to Native Americans, if memory serves, that call their team the Redskins. So I'm like, I don't know. It's basically, I see it as not my place. If it'll be sorted out, it'll be sorted out. If not, there's more pressing issues to worry about than what one calls a sports team.
And basically, like, what that whole thing introduced me to was the concept of the so-called, quotation marks, social justice warrior, which is what these Twitter people were. And basically what they have a tendency to do is jump on something that's in the news and completely switch it to something else related to the fact that they are being oppressed by people. And
right.
They have basically, the reason a lot of them have basically ruined the causes for a lot of the people they claim to be the spokesman for, whether that be feminism, racial rights, etc., because they take it to some crazy radical position that is like almost as bad as, the groups that they claim. It basically, for instance, I'll just use this: you can't fight, a group like the Ku Klux Klan or something by being just as crazy as they are. That doesn't work. That makes everyone look bad, and that's kind of what the kind of stuff they do.
Right, and for those of you who are curious about social justice warriors, if you want to see how rapidly your brain cells can die, and we're talking faster than an episode of Happy Tree Friends die. Reddit has an actual thing called Tumblr in Action. So basically here, I even see one that says Tumblr in Action is a festering wound. Pumpkin spice lattes. Tumblr users can't stand that people like smartphones. You hate a vile character.
Like the pumpkin spice one, the Twitter literally says, it's someone posted a Twitter, why are straight white boys so against pumpkin spice lattes? Maybe they should be against other things like, I don't know, rape culture? That sounds like a joke. That person is completely serious. They have taken the like pumpkin spice lattes and somehow twisted that into an argument about rape culture.
You hate a vile character? No, you hate women. White women have a psychological penchant for fangirling over serial killers. Marriage is a notion of the patriarchy. Being transgender doesn't allow me to make vague Facebook statuses.
And basically what this, our topic for today basically is tied to this completely because this stuff kind of reared up again recently where these sorts of people decided to take on gamers. And so what you ended up having, for lack of a better word, was 4chan versus Tumblr basically come out of nowhere.
and just to let everybody know, we are on Tumblr, though don't post everything very often, just every now and then. Thinking about maybe posting something there every Tuesday Tumblr, something like that, but
yeah. Tumblr isn't inherently bad by any means. It's just kind of like Tumblr seems to be the place where a lot of these people go. It's kind of like I use a WordPress, and WordPress gets kind of accused of being like the fanboy page. It's just these different groups kind of all become saturated with someone that people don't like, and Tumblr unfortunately got the social justice people.
So to kind of set the stage for this, an individual named Zoe Quinn put out a game named Depression Quest. I'm thinking it was, if memory serves, it was some online creation tool of some sort that was used to put this thing together. I haven't looked at it. I probably will when I get the chance, just to see.
People were mad because she got funded by Steam Greenlight, and there's a tendency for I guess I haven't played the game myself, so I can't really say anything. But there were people that from the get-go seemed to hate the game, and I don't know exactly why. I think a lot of it had to do with it being an adventure game, and that's not a really quote-unquote cool type of game to be making right now. And it just kind of went from there, basically.
And one person, Phil Wesley, he's the owner of DMG Ice. I kind of watched a video of his where he talked about it and something about needing more visuals, not so many typos. Good first effort, but needs work. So I'll have to look at it later. But what happened to get this game press kind of is where this whole controversy starts.
Yeah.
She was accused of basically sleeping with somebody in order to have them give this game press of sorts.
And the caveat there is that it was like a jilted ex-boyfriend that made this accusation, so it immediately puts you in the dirty laundry territory you don't want to be in as an outside observer.
So, and this would have been one of those things that would have blown over in a couple of weeks at most, and then all of a sudden, shitstorm hits.
Yeah.
What wound up happening, multiple threads get deleted all of a sudden off of 4chan, off of other sites. People do some digging around, and allegedly, it was because she asked the right people, hey, can you remove this?
Not only that, but there were DMCA things that were going on, too. She was accusing people of plagiarizing and getting stuff taken down through the digital copyright, Millennium can't talk. The DMCA. She was going through and having stuff forcibly removed.
And so it just, the stride zone effect hits, and bam, goes public. So that, and then all of a sudden, articles just started popping out all of a sudden. Gamers are over, or something like that. And it's just, so that just sets the stage for controversy back and forth. You were the one that told me about more of the full story about Quinn being a social justice warrior as well, which adds more fun to the mix.
Well, yeah, and like basically the main situation there is that, yes, there are a lot of people that are really misogynist towards females in the gaming industry. You can see that basically looking at any, even if people are doing it as a joke, you look at any video and people are like, there's a person named Anita Sarkeesian who she makes these videos that are talking about feminism in video games. And her videos aren't inherently, bad by any means, but you would think that she was basically committing some kind of atrocity against mankind because all of a sudden she ends up with these, hate-filled threats constantly on her YouTube, and people, I guess, found out her actual house information and were calling her and doing death threats and stuff. That's ridiculous. Like, that stuff is, and that adds like fuel to the fire, because if someone gets in that mindset where they're constantly being attacked by this, anonymous male gamer demographic, they're going to suddenly lash out at it, and these kind of things just feed each other, basically.
Right, and that's part of that. It reminds me of why when one posts publicly on the internet, they have to. Used to be you could feel like you can be yourself and no big deal. Now you have to practically walk on eggshells in some cases, depending on where you're at.
Yeah.
Otherwise, your words are either taken the wrong way, or if they're taken the right way, it's blown out of proportion to the point where you're like, where some people were like, "Oh, I'm not going to talk about this anymore." The one comic book guy who had this rant on Facebook that went out of control, at least he had the intelligence to walk away from this, because
he realized that was not a fight he needed to be in, basically, after a while.
And, regardless of how he felt, and somebody like me looking at this from the sidelines going, okay, I understand where he's coming from, but there's too much emotion in this.
Yeah.
And Quinn, on the other hand, seems to be taking the baseball bat. There's a beehive, hitting the beehive, and wondering why bees are coming out of it.
Well, and to me, it looks like she got outed by her ex-boyfriend, basically saying, yeah, the reason you're getting all this press because your game is because you're sleeping around in the, there's an ethical situation where you're sleeping around. That could have been, just a situation where she could have. That's a personal attack that has nothing to do with gaming as a whole. But unfortunately, all of a sudden, people reading this, because he made it very public what was going on, started taking it upon themselves to attack her. And then instead of just kind of letting it disappear, she then went to Twitter, got a bunch of like-minded people to suddenly declare war on gaming as a whole, and look where we are now. And now you've got companies like the Wall Street Journal, I believe, posting incredibly one-sided articles that don't, talk about the kind of bad stuff that she may have been doing, or, and basically what it does is it takes it from the original concept of, hey, there's these journalistic ethics situations going on, and turns it completely into men hate women in gaming.
And that's kind of the issues that I've noticed, that I'm like, wait, because after reading some of the comments on some of the stuff, I'm like, yeah, some of these people are sounding very, very reasonable on this. Going, and there are people who have even said, I don't agree with her being harassed like this, and I agree with that as well. There are lines you don't need to be crossing on things like this. At the same time, we're ignoring a larger issue that's popping up, and that's so-called video game journalism, where you're caught in this trap of having to do things a certain way, otherwise you don't get access to demos, you don't get access to stuff before it's released so you can review it at all. And basically, to the point where large game companies, publishers, dictate the direction of coverage on games and what have you. So, and you kind of ran into that sort of issue to a point yourself. You used to write for an independent site.
Yes, I did. Yeah, I ran into a couple situations like that, which kind of brought into the question independence of a gaming site. And I loved writing for the site that I wrote for. When I started doing it, it was completely voluntary, and did it just because it was kind of a cool thing. Hey, I work for a video game website. And then, unfortunately, when money came into it, that's when stuff started getting kind of iffy, because the site owner started getting a lot of advertising revenue. And then there would suddenly be things that were going on, like occasionally we would get banner ads sponsored by something, and we would get decrees of, hey, don't say anything bad about this game because they're sponsoring the site for this week, which is fine. But, if there's a controversy going on or something, I think we were sponsored by Medal of Honor, and there was a big controversy going on. We weren't allowed to talk about it while that banner ad was up there, because the sponsor might pull out and it would have, hit the bottom line. There was other times where it was heavily implied that a game review you were giving something might need to be tweaked up a little bit. I was never, told, hey, give this game this review, but sometimes it was, I would have a review that would point towards a certain score, and they would say, how about you take that up a couple notches? And that was basically they were worried they were going to piss off game companies, because there was some big situations at the time going on where I know, for instance, Ubisoft very publicly got reprimanded because they tried to basically dictate the journalistic ethics of a couple companies, and told them, if you don't give our games higher than 8 out of 10, we're going to pull funding and stuff.
And they got ripped a new one. And put in their place, I'm assuming.
Well, basically, the person that got this shakedown threat went public. He quit the site in question. I believe it was GameSpot, but I don't remember off the top of my head. It was either GameSpot, or it very well might have been a published magazine at the time, but one of them, the gentleman ended up, I can look at that here in a sec, he ended up basically outing them, and then it caused a big crap storm in the media about, are these actual reviews, or are these basically paid advertisements, which is what they kind of turned into at this point. And a bunch of stuff like that just made it to where, after a while, I stopped having fun with it. And when my actual job, I switched jobs in 2011. When that happened, I basically had to make a choice where I said, I left on good terms and everything, but I look back at it and I'm like, I'm kind of glad I left at that point, because it's gotten awful now.
And we've got a Reddit thread that kind of breaks it down. One of the articles I read on Forbes criticized those who were hailing Breitbart as actually having real journalists because of the political leanings of that particular site. The bad news is people on a lot of mainstream sites and venues, they don't do what other people on other sites do that are more independent. They They look for the information no matter where it's at, read between the lines, remove editorialism from the mix, and look at what facts are presented. Breitbart apparently published emails confirming that there may be an issue here with the whole controversy where people from various game publishing companies and before anybody goes haywire over what people from various publications talk to each other in their own private groups. Well, it's kind of like, think of it like networking.
Yeah.
It's nothing new. It happens in every industry, in one way or another. Sort of like how people who are in the support area of retail, where they sell point-of-sale machines, things like that. I'm fairly confident they probably talk to each other too, in regards to certain things like, oh, we better not use this software. It's in these point-of-sale terminals. It's vulnerable, or it's known to crash right in the middle of a transaction or something. Various professions have these. That's not the issue. The issue is when do you need to kind of go, we know this person's going through all of this. Should we be saying, hey, let's send her a card of support? Is that appropriate? Is that not so appropriate? And folks, this is one of the reasons I don't identify myself as a journalist. It is a rough profession.
Yeah.
Because basically you have to remove every ounce of your humanity except for a little bit, act as a robot basically of sorts, which can be both good and bad. The good part is you're minimizing any bias. The bad part, in my view, is you're more susceptible to editors, which if you're working with a very good editor or one that's very open to new ideas, suggestions, and what have you, it can be a good thing. If it's an editor that wants only one point of view displayed, no matter what, well, we run into the question of balance.
Well, like a couple of the main issues right now that are going on that they're having are the people that are basically with the Zoe Quinn thing, people that are in bed with the reviewers, basically, literally and figuratively, where they, hey, I'll do stuff if you can give me a better review, whether it be a bribe of some kind, like, hey, here's all this swag, if you be sure to remember us when you're reviewing the game, or, there's actually, have you heard about the people that are on Patreon and other things like that?
Describe that a little bit for me. I've been out of the loop in video games, and I'm trying to get back into things a little bit on that one.
Pretty much Patreon, what it is it's a tool for people to, let's say you run a website, you wanted to set up a Patreon page. It's kind of like a hybrid of like a Kickstarter. And you say, right, hey, if I write an article, you pledge to give me $1, basically. It's microtransactions. Well, there's game journalists that have these Patreon pages now, which is kind of ethically in a gray area because there's nothing really stopping a company from saying, hey, we'll kick you, $20 an article, Mr. Guy that writes for this website.
Right.
And being on the payroll in a weird backwards way. And that's been happening a lot lately, and that kind of pulls things into question. You also have people that are going out of their way. They're backing Kickstarters and stuff, and basically helping develop the game, and then turning around and reviewing them. And that's even kind of an ethical problem you don't want to make light because technically you had input on it. That'd be like me writing a book and then reviewing it and saying this was the greatest book ever made.
Yeah, and just to let people know, believe it or not, it is possible to have a group or whatever publish a publication. be friends with game publishers and still do honest reviews.
Yeah.
There was a company called Sierra. They eventually became known as Sierra Online. They bought out by like Disney or something like that. But back in the 80s, before the great video game market crash where everything was oversaturated, and you can find out about this in Stephen Levy's Hackers, Heroes of the Computer Revolution. It's in the third part where they talk about video game hackers where they're able to code things on the fly and create video games for various companies. A publication basically said this game was terrible, the quality was low, and yeah, the friends of Ken Williams and such who owned this publication, yeah, they felt bad, but they still wanted to remain honest. So it can be done. I think nowadays, though, disclosure is in order. If you're like, hey, yeah, they're a friend of mine, but we're not going to let this affect our basically obligation to you to be as fair as possible. Unfortunately, people are not willing to do the disclosure part, hence the controversy that has been popping up and then glossed over by social justice warriors or one thing or another. So
one thing that's really disheartening is if you try to look up, this whole thing is called Gamergate. If you try to look this up on Wikipedia, for instance, you'll notice that the entire Gamergate thing is entirely about the misogynist aspect of it. And if you go to their talk page, every single instance where someone has tried to add in things about what actually originally caused it, or the whole thing about gaming journalistic ethics, it's been wiped clean, and then they put things in there that are entirely based upon the fact that it's the bearded man children fighting the women type, stereotype, and it's ridiculous because you have we could have a big giant argument about Wikipedia here, or a big thing, but that's a side deal. But basically, you have people that are on this side that, rather than wanting to listen to actual arguments, are just trying to silence the other side of it. I don't even think they're two sides. I think it's two entirely different arguments, basically, and one of them's getting co-opted, in my opinion.
And I noticed a couple of boxes have popped up. Please be calm and civil when you make comments and when you present evidence, and avoid personal attacks. I take it these don't normally pop up on discussion pages.
No, basically this particular site, or this particular article, has been flagged as being like, it'd be like if you did an article right now on like the Russian-Ukrainian war basically going on. You would end up having similar care taken in this because it's so politicized that you're going to have both sides trying to go in there and silence the other one. And unfortunately, a dumb topic about how gamers are doing this stuff has suddenly been overshadowed by this. So instead of it taking a objective approach, you have people going in there fighting each other. And what I actually linked to you, and we can put this in the notes or something, is the talk page, which is where people say, hey, I don't quite agree with this, and people are writing giant, vitriol-filled messages to each other like, you don't understand the ethics of Wikipedia and all this stuff, and it's just like, good Lord, people.
Yeah, because I've seen like a talk page or two before. This has a thing saying, please be respectful. This also has a second yellow box with the exclamation point. This is not a forum for general discussion about Gamergate controversy. And Any such comments may be removed or refactored. Please limit discussion to improvement of this article. You may wish to ask factual questions at the reference desk, discuss relevant Wikipedia policy at the village pump, or ask for help at the help desk. And also it must adhere to biographies of living persons. Contentious material that is unsourced or poorly sourced must be removed immediately from the article and its talk page, especially if it's potentially libelous.
The problem is that the situation is the way Wikipedia works is it only wants you to put sourced material in there from, like, Wall Street Journal and stuff like that. But an argument can be made that at the very core of this situation is journalistic corruption within the gaming industry. So
right.
You could make the argument that you can't really trust those sources either, and that's the problem. Is you have articles getting posted in support of this that are from various publications, but the counter argument is being silenced because it's from a smaller website, and that's one of the tactics they were using to silence that fine young capitalists thing we mentioned earlier.
Fine young capitalists. They were an initiative trying to get more women into gaming. Am I correct?
Correct.
What happened with that? Because apparently there was a conflict. Allegedly, they made up publicly.
Well, they had some questions, basically, because you end up with a shady area whenever you're promising. It was basically like it's not really a scholarship, but it was like a contest for female game developers.
Right.
And what happened was there was a question as to whether a transgendered person could go in there, and they said yes, but you have to have identified as a woman at this point in time in order for us to, do this. That was keeping people from trying to say, hey, this is an easy way for me to get in here. Hey, I'm a woman now. And this apparently made Zoe Quinn mad. And, we keep going back to Zoe Quinn here. She was trying to do a similar thing. And so she basically started attacking this group. This whole thing got drug into the Gamergate thing as a side deal, but she went on there and got a bunch of game publishers to all of a sudden start running not game publishers, a bunch of journalists to start writing articles. Fine young capitalists are anti-transgendered people, and fine young capitalists are racist, and fine young capitalists are doing this. They're just blah 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 blah. And they were getting articles taken down, and they actually lost investors because of this, because people were like, I don't want to be part of this stuff. And what ended up happening is 4chan actually came to their rescue, and they had an Indiegogo page, and they actually donated tons of money to it. And then instead of looking at it and saying, wow, 4chan did something good, people were like, 4chan was just trying to spite women by doing that. It was just this ridiculous circle jerk that was awful and completely obstructed the entire purpose of the whole situation.
And for those of you who are kind of new to the show or new to the concept of 4chan, the mistake that a lot of people make is they assume that everybody from that site and Anonymous is this one cohesive group. No, they're not. It's a bunch of individuals. Sometimes they may band together for one cause that may be worthwhile. Other times the cause may be just a prank. It really depends on which individuals get together to do something. They're not all part of this big giant machine, and that's where a lot of people get confused or misunderstand and then say, oh, well, all these people hate women, all these people. And I think that's a big part of the problem is the lack of understanding. And when you throw the whole all gamers are evil, gamers are over type of mentality out there, reminds me of that one Mighty Ducks movie where the talented kid, due to redistricting of school districts, is pulled to one team instead of the other to the ducks themselves. The kid basically said towards the end of the movie, "I don't care about all this infighting, all this fighting. I just want to play hockey." A lot of people are like, "I don't care at the moment about gender issues or any political issues. I had a long day at school, at work, whatever. I just want to be left alone so I can escape for a little while, so that I can play the games I enjoy and escape for a little while." And then you have all of this happen, and they get yanked back into the real world, even though they just want a few minutes to relax. And I can see how that can get irritating. Does that sound about right, or is there more to it?
That's the thing, is it's just like, and this has happened before with these kind of things, is people are setting aside time to try to do something better in the world, and they get drug into just this quagmire, and it's disheartening, because now you've got big media companies that are posting these articles about how gamers are all like, slobbering misogynists, and then they post the video of a hooker getting beat up in Grand Theft Auto or something, and like, see, it's proof. And it's like the whole Doom causing the Columbine shooting all over again. It's just another thing. And my whole thing is, most of these people that are jumping on this bandwagon could give a crap about the game industry. They're not trying to do anything to promote, women within the games industry. And I'm not trying to pretend that there's not a problem with how women are, portrayed in games, or how, like, it's mostly a boys' club. That's obviously the issue. The issue is don't use gaming as your battlefield for this proxy war that you're trying to fight, where you think that for some reason your opinion is more valid than anyone else's, and you need to scream and shout and silence the other side of it.
And internet satirist Maddox even kind of commented on it long ago, basically saying, "Step up and make a video game."
Well, he actually recently wrote an article that was even more in tune to this, because have you heard about the whole Spider-Woman thing that happened? That was a very similar situation.
Absolutely, and
basically, for those that don't know, an Italian artist, I believe he was Italian, made a cover to a Spider-Woman comic where she was basically posed in a very provocative manner, where basically it was just kind of it was kind of smutty. It looked like it could have been like she basically didn't have any clothes on. I mean, she was in a fully covered in a bodysuit, but let's face it, for it to be real, the fabric would be like tiny and thin. And Maddox basically pointed out that it caused a bunch of outrage. People were like, women can't really pose like that, and blah blah blah. And then Maddox tried to point out that Spider-Man is posed like that in every single picture, but no one flips a crap about how Spider-Man gets posed like that, because he is not being, he doesn't have an advocate. There aren't rabid males that, that care about how men are objectified. And let's face it, that does happen. You cannot tell me that there aren't situations where men get objectified. Just look at places like, you have like, what's that male strip club? Chippendales, like stuff like that. That kind of stuff. Or how people are in, romantic comedies and stuff. It happens, but they don't have as big of a loud lobby that can fight for them. And I honestly don't think most guys give a crap, to be honest, to be completely blunt.
And truth be told, when he talks about, like, it's like all these games are filled with these women, blah 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 blah, and he's like, no shit, it's because that's what people are buying. And then pointing out other people, women who actually had a very very important role in designing and bringing popular games into the market, who got it, who did very very well. And he on his little scree after the YouTube video. He lists games like Restaurante Amor, Don't Take It Personal, Babe, Just Ain't Your Story, Mismanagement, Long Live the Queen, King's Quest, Hey Baby, Dysphoria, Sissy's Magical Ponycorn Adventure, what? Which he gave an F. And his paragraph says it all at the end of it. So there you have it, a cross-section of some of the games made for women by a woman, and one game made by formerly a man for formerly women/men. I can't wait to load my save point to shave my some tits, manage stressed out workers, and kill some men for catcalling. Great job, ladies. And his smartass fake counter basically says 335,297 million boring ass visual novel games will be developed by women this year. Keep in mind he is a satirist, and he's probably one of the few entities out there that's practically immune to social justice warriors, because the only thing that they'll do is increase the site traffic.
Yeah, you don't want to really, like, he had a big beef with vegetarians for a while, where he pissed off a bunch of vegans and they were sending him hate mail constantly. It made his website more entertaining. It didn't do anything.
And his thing was the correct way of dealing with things like that is just post the hate mail publicly, or some of it, and just cheerfully walk away. Quinn keeps coming back. Actually, I don't think she'll be talking about this much longer. Otherwise, people are just going to get tired of it and walk away anyway and not pay attention anymore. I didn't even know who this person was until she showed up on Cracked, and I'm like, what? And then I read the comments, and I'm like, something doesn't seem right. And so it's just, I don't appreciate, as somebody who used to play video games avidly growing up, I don't appreciate being referred to as misogynistic.
Well,
Especially,
go ahead.
I was outnumbered by 2 females growing up. My mom and my sister. And every time I feel like I'm being accused of this, or every time I read articles like that, I feel like I'm being accused of that. And it's upsetting. And I'm like, really? I was raised not to do that sort of stuff, and I feel like I'm being accused of this. And
it's basically like, if you want to go with, I'm just going to throw a straw man argument out here. If you want to blame all gamers, we're talking everyone, which coincidentally is about 40% women now, for how a few gamers act, then you might as well say, well, because of the Westboro Baptist Church, all Christians are crazy, people. You could say because of the Islamic State or ISIS, all Muslims are crazy and evil. You can do those kind of, and that's the problem, is you get a couple idiots on 4chan or something that, want to send death threats and post a Google Maps picture of someone's house on Twitter or something. Yeah, that sucks, but don't go and just label every single person with the same brush like that, and that's what's happening. Basically, gamers are starting to become the new scapegoat for anything that's wrong in the world, and it's getting kind of ridiculous.
Absolutely, and I'm just, it just gets tiring for me to basically feel like I have to basically apologize because of the reproductive organs I was born with. It's getting old pretty quickly, and hopefully it gets better. I don't know if it will, but I hope it gets better before somebody does something really stupid and people in real life wind up getting hurt somehow.
Yeah. All it takes is someone that's mentally unstable to read some of this stuff and, take it literally or something, and it's terrifying that they just need to let it kind of die out and not promote it so much. The media is just making a big giant spectacle out of it, out of something that should have been on 4chan, basically. You know?
Right, and that was my big issue is, and I think we're running into another big issue as well is established media versus more independent outlets, where the independent outlets are trying to do their best to be as fair as possible or have as high quality content as possible, but the money sucks.
Yeah.
And maintaining that balance. So it's a tough position to be in. Especially when you have large companies like World Wrestling Entertainment telling gaming companies or game publishing companies, you cannot have this particular wrestler in a vulnerable position in any screenshots you show. And at least in that case, one site decided to blatantly ignore it.
They made a review with every single picture was of Triple H getting moves done on him.
Right, and that's kind of the issue that we've been running into today is it was a proxy war between two entities, and then others join in the fray, and people from established type of venues decide to take an opportunity to go after independent venues. And I think we also kind of touched upon an issue with Wikipedia's policy regarding established sources, which is understandable to an extent, but we also know the vulnerability or the issue with that one as well, because the bad news is if an independent entity did their homework, there's this policy of no original research can be done.
Yeah.
In other words, you can't do the research yourself. You can't do like some science experiment yourself that's totally original and post the results on Wikipedia. You have to get published by some other entity that's established, and then you can be cited.
Yeah, and you have to fit with their group of like preordained, quote unquote credible sources, which, yeah, I mean, there's sites you don't want to be on there as like I could make a website that says the sky is purple and post that, and then say I could like get the Wikipedia article and say, according to one such website, the sky is purple. That doesn't work, but you also run into situations where you have smaller venues that might have worthwhile content on it that get silenced because they're not Forbes or something like that. And that kind of stuff can be used in a political agenda, and I think that's what we're seeing right now.
And ironically, it's a site where they're trying to avoid having it has to have a neutral point of view, but what a friend of ours has referred to as POV warriors keep fighting about things over and over again, which is why he put himself on a self-imposed exile from being some sort of editor on there. And I remember how he actually went to the library, picked up books, was writing an entire research paper, editing an article, and it's just like I like the idea of sharing knowledge, but it needs to be able to adjust to the times too, and they haven't been able to as of yet. I think this kind of wraps up this episode. Since we were able to record ahead of time, it gives us more time to get our notes together and so we don't forget anything. If you have any feedback for this episode, feel free to drop in the comments below. If you're like, oh, where's all these source links and everything else, some of them I may be able to copy once this thing is published on YouTube. But thenextreport.com/podcast is where the audio is updated and everything else. And I actually have a new version of Podcast Generator installed, and looks pretty sweet so far. So exciting changes here. It was good to have you back.
No, I appreciate the invite and everything. I didn't intend on being off the show for such a long time, but with moving and everything, it just kind of made it infeasible for a little while.
Oh, absolutely. And the good news is, um, maybe we'll have some more episodes. And speaking of which, episode number 60, the plan is to talk about some of the Stephen Tompkins Shaggy, as we affectionately call him at work, has a new phone. As you all know, I have the Galaxy Note 3 with the cool stylus and everything. I can write on the screen. I can literally take screenshots to where it'll let you edit the screenshot with your pen, so I can circle part of it to emphasize a part, like a comment or something like that, or other things. His phone's bigger than mine, apparently, and you can literally use your finger to write.
Hello?
Yeah. Yeah. You can use the end of a pen. What did you just hold up to the camera?
That was my laptop as a proxy for a cell phone.
Well, actually, with Google Voice, which is being integrated into Hangouts, I think even now you can still get a Google Voice number and get free calling to U.S. and Canada. So you could literally turn your computer into a voice over IP phone, even now. So but I think this just wraps up the episode. But I'm going to do the same thing we did in the last episode. What are you wanting to talk about in future episodes? Any ideas? People get to hear some brainstorming.
I'd have to probably think about that. I'm not 100% sure. There's pretty much a lot of entertainment stuff going on, so maybe some of the new TV shows that are out or something. I know there's a lot of comic book stuff coming out for all those years that comic book movies were kind of crappy. All of a sudden now there's so many of them it's hard to keep up with, and comic book TV shows and everything else. So
I've started getting hooked on Once Upon a Time myself. Rumpelstiltskin being my favorite character so far. They're taking every fairy tale and kind of integrating them and twisting the characters a little bit. I'm like, what? Peter Pan is a bad guy and a cult leader?
You might want to check out, there's a comic book, and there's also a video game for something called Fables. Have you ever heard of that?
Fables?
Similar concept as Once Upon a Time, and it's a lot darker because it was done for the Vertigo comic line, so it's basically DC's like adult line, but it's very similar. Like the main character in it is basically the big bad wolf, but he's kind of turned into a person, and the love interest is Snow White, more or less. But it's a similar show. If you've never seen it, I would recommend. There's a video game out there called A Wolf Among Us, which is a prequel to the whole thing. It's pretty cool. And it's the same sort of idea. It's not, Once Upon a Time has mostly the Disney characters. This one has more like obscure characters for the most part.
Oh, that is really cool. Definitely looking at some of these shows, and because we have Netflix now, and the initial thing was to do the free trial and see what happens, but then the original series, Orange, yeah, that Netflix original series, and then Once Upon a Time and other things, and I know season 4 of that won't be on there for a while because it's going to be debuting this Sunday, but I think some of these TV shows sound like a good for the 61st episode.
Okay.
that
We'll talk about that. A lot of these shows will have hopefully aired by that time, so we can talk about stuff.
anyway, entertain yourself, educate yourself, empower yourself. Hopefully we'll have a new intro for this particular episode. For now, you can just see our faces on YouTube. Woohoo. We are everywhere. We are even on Tumblr as well. So I'll edit
start blaming people for stuff on it. We'll get more views.
Oh my goodness. But yeah, thenextreport.com. We have a link to the podcast on there. Our social networking bar is on the left as usual, where you can, and everything else. And I'm so glad we have an official YouTube page now instead of it being linked to my personal Google Plus account. But anyway, we will see you next episode.
Have a good one.